And we're back. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Thing Bunker. Today we'll be going over the Sturmgewehr, the StG-44, the world's first assault rifle, as you can see. Now, before we get into it, if you're a first-time viewer, welcome to the channel. We're really happy to see you guys, and we're a channel that does military history, as you probably could tell. Now, if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. You might notice a little bit of a difference in format. Want to try something new, right? With that in mind, let's go ahead and get into it. During the First World War, the French pioneered the idea of having a lighter pseudo assault rifle machine gun that would travel with your front line and would provide the infantry on the front with crucial fire support. The Americans then took to this idea very quickly and created the BAR, purely out of necessity because the French botched the conversion of the show shot to 30-06, but that's another story. A story which you can learn in our previous videos on the show shot and the BAR. I'm not telling you to go watch those videos, but go watch those videos. Anyways, moving on from there, the Americans pioneered the concept of a squad automatic weapon where the BAR would be placed in every single squad. So every single squad had some kind of full auto machine gun. And then they had the platoon level machine gun being the M1919. We then moved to nations such as the British, the Soviets, and the Japanese, all of whom had machine guns that weren't on the squad level. They were high. I think they were higher up in the platoon level. They didn't have a squad automatic weapon, but they at the very least, their machine guns were in fact developed with the idea of having high amounts of mobility for a machine gun in mind. The British had the Bren gun that had a fully enclosed 30-round magazine that was top fed onto the weapon. So you'd put your magazine on top and your weapon was down here and you'd fire it. The DB-28 similar, except it had the dinner plate one. You're probably seeing the footage now. And the Type 11 had the hopper feed system, which all of these systems go from slightly outside of conventional to janky as all get out, probably in that order. However, the point being, these weapons could be picked up and moved throughout the battlefield very easily. Compared to a 1919 or your Hotchkiss machine gun, your MG-34, your MG-42, not so much. Those weapons were a little more complicated to move. You had to move multiple components. You had to, at some of the machine guns, you had to have some form of disassembly, and you had to worry about the belt of ammunition. And if you don't know about belt-fed machine guns, you need to lay out your belt. You can't just start firing whichever way. The belt needs to be laid out, and that takes up time. That's why America embedded a BAR in every single squad, was so that this could supplement the lack of, or I say lack of, lack of mobility that the machine gun teams possessed. Now, what did the Germans have to fill this gap? Well, this wall could answer you because it was nothing. They had nothing to do this. And it was a slight design overpart in their military until in 1942 when a man by the name of Hugo Schmeisser entered the picture. In 1942, Hugo Schmeisser submitted his design to the War Department for a weapon that fired full auto or semi based on a selector switch, was fed from a 30-round magazine, and fired the intermediate cartridge of 7.92 by 33 Kurt ammunition, which is just a shrunken down version of the 7.92 by 57 Mauser. This bullet effectively would be the predecessor to the 7.62 by 39 ammunition used in the AK-47, which was just a shrunken down version of 7.62 by 54R used in the Mosin Nagant and the STRV 38 and 40. This design would be called the MP42. It would take about a year of development before the first prototype would be created, I suspect within about 6 to 8 months, which this design would be called the MP43. This is when the trials would begin. Then, in 1944, about a year later, the weapon had gone through its refinement and combat trials were ready to begin. About a couple months later, after 1,000 rifles MP-44s, the combat trial rifle, had been distributed to the German army and was very well liked, it was ready to be adopted. However, they weren't going to adopt it as the MP-44 because MP stands for, excuse my German, Maschinenpistol or something like that. It's effectively, it describes a weapon that fires a pistol caliber ammunition but can do it automatically. It's describing a submachine gun. Well, the Germans realized that the MP-44 is not that. It fires a much more accurate and much more long range bullet. So, with that in mind, they renamed it to StG-44, or the Sturmgewehr. The Sturmgewehr, at this time, in the 1940s in German, translates to storm gun. From there, throughout history, slowly over time, what Sturmgewehr means in German would translate from storm gun to assault rifle. The weapon is operated off a gas tube system. The way this works is when the bullet is fired and travels down the barrel, there's a certain point when there is a little tube that is in the barrel and the bullet passes it. The extra gas is pushed into the tube and back to where the bolt is to push the bolt back. This is gas operation. This type of gas operation had been used on weapons such as the show shot and the BAR, and now is being used on the Sturmgewehr. I suspect that the gas system came from the show shot, actually, not so much the BAR, because the Germans had extensive use of the show shot whenever they captured or they uh, they took over France. When they took over France and started using a lot of their equipment as police equipment, peacekeeping force equipment, they took a look at the show shot, and Hugo Schmeisser found out about the gas blowback design. The weapon weighed about 11.5 pounds fully loaded, which is admittedly a bit heavy, and its maximum effective range was about 900 meters or about 2,100 feet, which that's optimistic. But according to my German friend who also studies German history, the reason for this is because the way the Germans did it, they set up basically a runway, and you fired the bullet, and wherever the bullet landed, that's its effective range. I suspect in this circumstance that being able to put a bullet at 2,100 feet or 900 meters and then hitting someone at distance with those iron sights, bit of a different story. There was a magnified optic for about, I want to say, 2.5, 3 times magnification, which kind of helps, but at that distance, still not really. Just because you're able to put a tank shell, say you take your 76 millimeter M4 Sherman and you fire M62 downrange, and if it lands a mile away, just because it lands a mile away doesn't mean you can actually kill a vehicle at that distance. Overall, the Sturmgewehr was proven to be a very effective weapon. The German soldiers pretty much loved it, except for a few things, one of which was the weight, which compared to their Kar 98K is worse, but not worse than their MG platform of weapon. Another issue that arose was the handguard on the forward part of the barrel, or the barrel itself. Now, most weapons at this time and in the future would use non-metal materials. Metal conducts energy. Heat is also energy. Therefore, whenever the forward part was, I say this, it's an AR, obviously. However, whenever the metal barrel heated up, it transferred the heat to the handguard and the grip, which caused some slightly less than optimistic sensations on your hand. That's why weapons like the AK and the AR use plastic or wood, respectively, so that you don't burn your hand. Even weapon, and that's why most hand grips were actually made out of wood, was so it didn't burn your hand. I don't know why the forward part of the weapon was made of metal. It still baffles me. It just baffles me that that's a decision, but it is what it is. Alright, I made it back. I have less hair and one less tooth to deal with. After having 6 shots of Novocaine, if there's any pronunciation issues in the video, I do apologize. Having a tooth extracted is not fun. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and continue where we left off. Now we'll move on to the variants of this weapon, the STG. And the only one to really exist is a family of 3, known as the Umlauf family, or which is German for curved barrel, and there is the name. That's how it's spelled. Yeah. Anyways, the Umlauf, I don't know if it's classed as a separate weapon. Here's the Sturmgewehr, and the Umlauf is classified as a completely different weapon, or if it's a variation or modification of. I assume it's similar to how the U.S. named like the T-34 Calliope, for example, the large rack of rockets on top of a Sherman, and it's a modification for the Sherman. So is Humlauf in reference to the scopes, periscopes, and the barrel itself, or is it referring to a Sturmgewehr that's had a lengthened barrel added on? I don't know. The purpose behind the Humlauf was to give you the advantage of being able to fire around a corner. The idea is that the enemy is over here and you're here, so on a corner, and this is a building. So you want to be able to fire around the corner without actually exposing yourself to fire. 3 variants exist: the 90 mil, or the 90 degree, the 60 degree, and the 30 degree. The 90 degree was just awful. It tended to just jam. The barrel jammed with bullets constantly. The 60 degree less so, but it wore down the rifling significantly quickly. You could imagine why, because you're curving a bullet. Bullets aren't meant to curve while in flight. They can slightly, but not really. The 30 degree was the one that saw the most production, and some variants exist where you can fire above or over a berm. You'll see an image of that soon. And comparatively, the 30 degree one wasn't bad. Just because it's comparative doesn't mean it's actually not bad. But anyways, that's the Humlauf. The final contribution the Sturmgewehr gave to modern human society is the development of the AK-47. Rather, it's the weapon referenced by Kalashnikov as inspiration for how he built the AK-47. One of the 2 guns. I'll get to that in a moment. The Sturmgewehr, the design choice was the overall shape of the weapon. The gas blowback system, the exposed gas tube compared to an AR, where the gas tube is fully enclosed, the 30-round magazine, their overall selector switch. That whole thing Kalashnikov took and then created the AK-47 out of. Now, this is where I talked about the second gun that inspired the design of the AK. That would be the M1 Garand. The wood furniture and the heat stamping and tempering methods used to create the receiver for the M1 Garand was directly responsible for how the components for the AK were built. So Kalashnikov took a Sturmgewehr and an M1 Garand and essentially made a rifle that was an M1 Garand made in the shape of a Sturmgewehr. So it's literally a Sturmgewehr and an M1 Garand had a baby, and that's the AK-47. I'm not even joking. It's the AK-47. So that's the final contribution that the Sturmgewehr gave to the world. Overall, the Sturmgewehr was a very effective weapon. Now, I've heard talk that the Sturmgewehr was a last-ditch attempt to sort of advance the German Wehrmacht and the SS into military success after weapons like the Gewehr 40. I want to say the 43. Well, yeah, the 43, but the 42 and the 43 failed. But I don't think that's the case. The Sturmgewehr had been developed early on in the war. I say early, 1942, but the designs for the Sturmgewehr itself, the overall design on paper, took place in the 40s, in early 1940, 41, and then Hugo Schmeisser then submitted his, as you know, his weapon design to the War Office, and then over the course of the next 2 years, there's the gun. It's just that's normal. That's normal weapon time development. It's just with the crumbling economy and a crumbling infrastructure system, as well as the fact that your manufacturing capability is just not there at all, hardly anymore. That's where the issues with the Sturmgewehr come up, and the weapon just it was just not that. It's similar to how people look at the Panther, or rather, it's the idea that people came up with equipment out of nowhere. Right, the Panther was developed for the Battle of Kursk in about the span of a year, and boom, it failed at Kursk because it was poorly designed in about a year. No, that's not what happened. This design had been early on. I want to say in 1942. They were just working on it and getting it finalized, and then Mustache Man go, "Ooh, I like this. I want this on there." And then some design changes happened, retrial, retesting, workarounds of the new issues that putting a 40-ton design on a 30-ton chassis arise. That's not what happened with, well, I mean, that's what kind of happened with the Sturmgewehr, not really. The point I'm trying to make here is the Sturmgewehr was not this sort of Tiger 2. It's not this sort of last ditch effort to be the to propel the Ubermensch forward and give essentially, well, the average Wehrmacht soldier super German technology, right? This is not what this is. The Sturmgewehr was just a solution to a problem that they've had for a long time, and a solution that a lot of nations had remedies for. The Americans came out later on with the M2 carbine, which was just a modification of the M1 carbine, which fired 30 caliber pistol ammunition and a small rifle, is a carbine rifle, that would then go on to directly inspire, or essentially that in the M1 Garand would go on to make the M14 carbine. But with that out of the way, that is the development of the Sturmgewehr. I'd like to thank you for watching, for letting me rant about the Sturmgewehr, the German automatic rifle, and if you will, like, subscribe. We really do enjoy it when you do that, and put a comment down below. Let us know what you would like to see next. What videos you want us to do next. What do you want us to talk about? The Vickers 6-ton, the T20, whatever. Just leave a comment, and we'll get around to doing it. We will. We've done it before, 3 times actually. But with that out of the way, as per usual, get back to work.